The scorching summer heat of Atlanta clamped down rigidly over the entire upscale villa district, thick and suffocating. The luxurious, standalone mansion blazed with lights, packed with guests. Melodious background music, bustling chatter, and waves of celebratory cheers wove together a false facade of familial warmth and harmony. Ostensibly a 24th birthday dinner for her younger brother Taylor, every guest present knew the truth. This was no ordinary birthday celebration. It was a public trial meticulously planned by her parents over the years, designed solely to exploit, dismiss, and abandon their daughter once and for all. Every gaze, every blessing, every ounce of favor and applause that night belonged entirely to the idle, spoiled Taylor. Christy, diligent, sensible, and self-disciplined, had been nothing but the most redundant, invisible, out-of-place outsider at this lively feast. After 18 years of persistent domestic oppression within her own family, the cruelest and most definitive ending was finally arriving. Barefoot on the cool marble foyer floor, Christy Carter let the faint chill temper the suffocating panic churning in her chest. 36 years old, with delicate features and a quiet elegance, she wore a plain navy dress she had tailored and sewn herself. Adorned with no fine jewelry, no elaborate makeup, she looked clean to the point of humility. For 18 long years, she had lived in this seemingly decent, harmonious home with nothing but compromise and caution. From the day Taylor was born, every ounce of preference, every family resource, every bit of care had been stripped entirely from her. Her parents had defined her from childhood as the elder sister, an outsider, someone born to give unconditionally and yield endlessly. Taylor, in contrast, was raised as the family's sole center of attention, their pride, and the undisputed heir to all their wealth and property. For 18 years, blatant double standards had dominated her youth and adulthood, ingrained into every rule of this household. As a student, she burned the midnight oil studying, consistently ranking at the very top of her grade. Yet her outstanding report cards never earned praise or encouragement, only her parents' dismissive remark that her excellence was merely expected, as if her hard work required no effort at all. Taylor, meanwhile, skipped classes regularly, indulged in trivial pleasures, and failed exam after exam. His every failure was excused endlessly. He was young, unfocused, merely playful, and would mature with time. All his recklessness was readily forgiven. In adulthood, the unfairness worsened drastically. She earned full scholarships to a top university, never costing her family a single cent in tuition or living expenses. Still, her parents reacted with irritation, complaining that her studies kept her from working to support the family, treating her independence as a burden. Taylor dropped out of high school early and lazed about at home aimlessly. He repeatedly raced cars without a license, maxed out credit cards recklessly, and landed in endless trouble, every crisis bailed out and smoothed over by his parents, who drained their savings to cover his mistakes. After 18 years of relentless conditioning, Christy had internalized a brutal truth. Every house, every storefront, every dollar in this family had never belonged to her. She was allowed to give, to sacrifice, to yield, but never to receive. This grand family gathering, assembled with every relative in attendance, was no accident. Her parents had carefully chosen this moment and this crowd to publicly finalize their asset distribution. Using the pressure of public witness, they intended to crush the last glimmer of hope in Christy's heart, strip her of all future claims, and force her to accept total ruin before everyone. Linda Carter, 60 years old, was a woman of polished refinement and obsessive vanity. A master of social tact, she hid extreme favoritism and coldness behind a graceful, composed exterior. Her neatly curled hair and crisp makeup embodied the poise of a wealthy matriarch, yet her gaze toward her daughter remained perpetually cold, critical, and harsh. She smiled warmly while greeting guests, yet the warmth vanished entirely the moment she turned to Christy, replaced by rigid detachment. Linda strode quickly to Christy's side and lowered her voice, her tone sharp with reprimand. "Stand straight. Stop wearing that gloomy face. Today is Taylor's birthday, his special day. Everyone here is to celebrate him and honor him. Don't look so miserable. Don't ruin your brother's fortune." Though muted, her words carried clearly to the surrounding relatives. The bustling living room fell half silent, Dozens of eyes fixed on Christy, filled with judgment, idle curiosity, and long-standing indifference. These relatives had watched her be marginalized her entire life, grown accustomed to the family's unfair rules, and never once spoken up for her. Christy lowered her gaze, suppressing the sour ache in her heart, her fingers tightening slightly. "I am not ruining anything." That calm rebuttal enraged Linda instantly. Unwilling to hear any explanation, she roughly tugged at Christy's collar, publicly humiliating her with brute force. "How dare you talk back? You're clearly resentful and ungrateful. You've always been petty and narrow-minded. Taylor is your only brother. Everything in this family is rightfully his. Compromise and tolerance are your duty as an elder sister. What could you possibly have to feel wronged about?" On the main sofa, 24-year-old Taylor slouched lazily in the elder's seat, his feet propped casually on a dining chair, utterly devoid of manners. Sipping an iced sweet tea in one hand and scrolling through short videos on his phone with the other, he paid no mind to the commotion around him. He had never held a steady job, dropping out, drowning in debt, causing trouble, and squandering money to find his daily life. Yet he lived recklessly and carefree, shielded by his parents' boundless indulgence and his sister's endless concessions. He glanced indifferently at the humiliated Christy, his eyes flashing with undisguised disdain and contempt, then returned to his phone, treating her suffering as nothing more than a trivial sideshow on his birthday. 62-year-old Richard Carter, the family's authoritarian patriarch, was domineering and deeply patriarchal, respected and unchallenged among the clan for decades. He cleared his throat, and the low sound instantly hushed the entire room. All relatives sat upright, setting down their utensils, knowing he was about to announce the life-altering asset distribution that would decide the siblings' fates. Richard swept his gaze across the crowd, his tone solemn and authoritative. "I have gathered all family members today to publicly announce the final, official distribution of all assets and inheritance belonging to your mother and me. Every property, business, house, storefront, savings, investment, and pension will be settled clearly and documented today to eliminate all future family disputes." Christy's heart plummeted. A frigid chill spread through her limbs. She had long anticipated this outcome. 18 years of blatant favoritism had predetermined everything. Yet a tiny, fragile sliver of hope lingered, begging that her parents might acknowledge her years of obedience and sacrifice, leaving her with a shred of dignity. Before she could steady her emotions, Linda cut in, raising her voice deliberately for every ear to hear, her tone unapologetic and final. "The rule is simple, the traditional way of our family. Daughters marry out and belong to other families. They are outsiders. Sons carry the family bloodline and legacy. They are our true roots. This primary villa, the northern lakefront vacation house, the 2 downtown commercial storefronts, all cash savings, financial funds, pensions, and family vehicles, 100% of all family assets will go entirely to Taylor." She whipped her head toward Christy, her eyes icy and unyielding, each word a blade. "You get nothing. From this moment forward, nothing in this family has anything to do with you. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, educated you. We have fulfilled every parental obligation. The rest of your life is your own responsibility. Do not expect a single cent or a single favor from this family ever again." A few relatives murmured in agreement, echoing the old saying that married daughters are spilled water, that family wealth inherently belonged to sons. Dozens of witnesses watched Christy be publicly stripped of all rights and humiliated, yet not one person spoke a word of justice. The coldness of human nature had never been more apparent. Richard pressed further, cementing the irreversible verdict. "This is our final decision, unchangeable forever. Harbor no illusions, no future pleas, no grievances. This family's future, fortune, and foundation all belong to Taylor. Not you, not in the slightest." Leaning back in his chair, Taylor wore a look of unbridled arrogance and entitlement. He basked in his parents' exclusive favor and his sister's lifelong compromise, smugly accepting the fruits of their decades of labor without an ounce of effort. Christy's fingers curled tightly, nails digging sharply into her palms. The physical pain grounded her, holding back the flood of grief, and injustice choking her chest. 18 years of suppressed resentment, endurance, and hurt threatened to overwhelm her. Still, she did not cry, argue, or break down. She stood motionless, steadying her trembling voice with every ounce of her strength, and whispered, "I understand." 4 simple words, exhausting the last trace of her longing for familial love. Linda sneered, still unsatisfied. "Good! Learn your place. Stop being ungrateful and tiresome." An awkward, suffocating silence settled over the room. Everyone assumed the cruel verdict was final, until a steady, deliberate knock sounded at the front door, shattering the frozen atmosphere and drawing all eyes toward the entrance. Frowning with annoyance, Richard strode to open the door. A formally dressed, poised professional lawyer stood outside, holding a black briefcase, his demeanor calm, rigorous, and solemn. The lawyer nodded politely. "Good afternoon. I am Howard Bain, licensed notary attorney. I act under the full authority of the late Miss Evelyn Harris. Per her final will and testament, I am here to publicly read her fully notarized will in the presence of all immediate family members this noon." Evelyn Harris was Christie's maternal grandmother, the only person who had ever truly loved her. She had passed away peacefully 3 months prior. Linda and Richard had taken full charge of the funeral arrangements, and Christie had cooperated quietly, never competing or complaining. At the mention of her mother's will, Linda's face twisted with instant irritation and resistance. "My mother's affairs are long settled. Her inheritance has already been arranged. There is no need for a public reading. Please come back another day." The lawyer stood firm, unyielding. "I apologize, Mrs. Carter. This is the decedent's final fully notarized and video-recorded will, legally binding and irrevocable. Ms. Harris explicitly stipulated that it must be read publicly today, with all family relatives present. The procedure is fixed and cannot be delayed or altered." The relatives perked up, whispering among themselves. Everyone assumed Evelyn's assets would ultimately pass to Linda, then to Taylor, just another windfall for the spoiled grandson. No one suspected the newly disinherited Christie would gain anything from the will. Cornered by the audience's stares, Richard reluctantly stepped aside to let the lawyer enter. Walking to the center of the living room, the lawyer opened his briefcase and retrieved the official, sealed legal document. Facing the crowd, he began to read solemnly and clearly. "I, Evelyn Harris, being of sound mind and clear consciousness, voluntarily execute this final notarized will, free of duress, persuasion, or fraud. All asset distributions reflect my true intentions, fully recorded and legally permanent. Item 1. My downtown Atlanta courtyard mansion, currently appraised at $870,000, shall be granted in full to my granddaughter Christie Carter as her sole and separate personal property, exempt from any marital or third-party claims." The room fell utterly silent. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. This downtown luxury property far exceeded the value of the Carters' current villa, a premium asset beyond comparison. Linda's polished smile froze completely. Her face darkened rapidly, shock and fierce disbelief blazing in her eyes. The lawyer continued unhurriedly. "Item 2. My Palm Beach oceanfront apartment in Florida, fully furnished with frontline sea views, valued at $540,000, is granted solely to Christie Carter. Item 3. All my personal bank savings, current and fixed deposits, totaling $1,260,000. Item 4. All stocks, funds, bonds, and financial assets presently valued at $980,000. Item 5. My collection of antiques, artwork, jewelry, and high-end furniture collectively valued at $320,000. Item 6. All death insurance benefits and private trust residuals shall be included in the estate and granted exclusively to Christie Carter." The staggering sequence of figures detonated across the room. Relatives quickly tallied the total, nearly $4 million, vastly surpassing the entire lifetime fortune Richard and Linda had accumulated. The formerly listless Taylor jolted upright, dropping his phone abruptly. His pupils constricted in pure disbelief. He stared rigidly at the quiet Christie, jealousy, resentment, and outrage flooding his features, all his former disdain vanishing entirely. The lawyer turned to the final page, his tone weighty and definitive. "All real estate, movable property, and financial assets belonging to me shall be fully and exclusively inherited by my granddaughter Christie Carter." I formally state, my daughter Linda Carter and my grandson Taylor Carter have long acted out of self-interest and misplaced priorities, persistently mistreating, suppressing, and discriminating against my granddaughter Christy. I have witnessed and understood all these injustices firsthand over the years. Therefore, I permanently revoke all inheritance rights of Linda Carter and Taylor Carter. They shall have no claim, no right of division, and no objection to any part of my estate. This final will is legally binding and permanently enforceable. Dead silence engulfed the house. 10 minutes prior, Christy had been publicly condemned to utter destitution, the most pitiful and abandoned person in the room. Now she stood heir to a staggering fortune that dwarfed her parents' wealth. The arrogant, domineering Carters were instantly reduced to a universal laughingstock. The cruel, dramatic reversal left everyone breathless. Linda completely lost her composure, her voice shrill and frantic. This is impossible. It's fake. I am her only daughter. Her inheritance should belong to me. You must have colluded with my daughter to deceive and manipulate my mother. The lawyer remained calm, presenting the official notarized video records. The full signing process is video documented and verifiable. The decedent acted voluntarily and consciously without coercion. The will is legal, valid, and irreversible. Taylor erupted in fury, chest heaving violently. Why not me? Grandma loved me the most. All of this should have been mine. The lawyer glanced up and read the special addendum, each word piercingly truthful. Special note: you have been idle, extravagant, and irresponsible in adulthood. You repeatedly betrayed your grandmother's trust and wasted her affection, which constitutes the core reason for your permanent disqualification from inheritance. The furious Taylor fell instantly mute. Flushing crimson, he froze in place, utterly defeated and humiliated. All his arrogance evaporated. Every relative bowed their head in awkward silence. Those who had just endorsed the family's unfairness and urged Christy to be obedient now looked utterly ashamed, unable to utter a single word of consolation. The entire scene was absurd and bitterly ironic. Linda's eyes blazed with venomous resentment as she stared at Christy, twisting the truth shamelessly. We raised you for 36 years, fed you, clothed you, educated you, and this is how you repay us. You deliberately humiliate us in public. You are selfish and cold-blooded. Christy finally spoke, her voice steady, rational, and devoid of anger or mockery, only weary clarity. For 18 years, you poured every resource, every dollar, every bit of favor entirely into my brother. You denied me, suppressed me, manipulated me psychologically every single day. Today you publicly declared that I deserve nothing from this family. I never schemed against you, nor did I scheme for Grandma's legacy. This inheritance is the justice and confidence she left me, not a weapon to hurt you. You are the ones who were ruthless and unfair, who pushed me to the brink with your own hands. Richard's face turned livid, his chest rising and falling sharply. The dignity and authority he had spent a lifetime building among his relatives had been shattered completely in front of everyone. His decisive verdict moments ago had been utterly overturned by a legal will, all his calculations crumbling to nothing. The lawyer collected his documents, nodded politely, and took his leave. The soft click of the closing door shattered the last pretense of harmony in this broken family. The moment the lawyer left, the stifling, awkward atmosphere inside the villa exploded completely, weighing heavily on everyone's heart. The vast living room fell dead silent, broken only by Linda's suppressed, bitter weeping, thin and grating to the ear. There was no trace of guilt in her tears, no remorse for the wrong she had done her daughter, not a shred of reflection on her decades of blatant favoritism. She wept only for her ruined dignity, for the great fortune that had slipped away out of nowhere, for the total collapse of schemes she had meticulously planned her entire life, and for her beloved son's lost chance at a massive inheritance. All the relatives present fidgeted restlessly, at a complete loss. In merely 10 minutes, the entire situation had undergone a staggering reversal. Moments before, everyone had acquiesced to the Carters' biased asset distribution. Some had even urged Christy to be generous and sensible, to understand her parents and tolerate her brother, indirectly enabling this unfair oppression. In the blink of an eye, the truth came to light and the tables turned. Every onlooker became a complicit bystander, stripped of all composure and grace. Unable to endure the awkwardness any longer, an elderly uncle stood up reluctantly to ease the tension, his tone perfunctory. "What's done is done. These are the wishes of the deceased. Every person has their own arrangements. You are all blood family. There is no need to let things turn ugly and irreconcilable." Yet these hollow words of mediation failed to calm Linda's shattered state of mind. She snapped her head up abruptly, her eyes bloodshot and her makeup smudged, her voice full of grievance and resentment. "A wish. This is nothing but a deliberate slap in my face. I am her biological daughter, yet she chose to leave all her lifelong savings and properties entirely to her granddaughter, leaving nothing for me and my son. She knew full well we had left all our family assets to Taylor, knew we would rely on our son for our old age, and still she cut off our livelihood without mercy." This absurd, selfish outburst laid bare Linda's truest inner thoughts. For decades, she had firmly believed that daughters were outsiders from birth, mere tools meant to sacrifice, yield, and give endlessly. Sons were her only hope and reliance. No matter how useless and incompetent her son was, no matter how sensible, diligent, and outstanding her daughter became, her scales always tipped blindly and infinitely in her son's favor, never granting Christy the slightest fairness. Taylor could no longer contain the rage and resentment churning inside him. He lifted his foot and kicked over the heavy solid wood dining chair beside him with brutal force. The metal legs crashed violently against the marble floor, letting out a harsh, piercing bang that shattered the dead silence of the room. "I refuse to accept this. All of this was supposed to be mine. My parents' house, Grandma's inheritance. Every single bit should have belonged to me. Why did it all end up with you out of nowhere?" He spun around abruptly, staring fixedly at Christy. There was no trace of sibling affection in his eyes, only blatant greed, jealousy, and hatred. Since childhood, he had grown accustomed to reaping rewards without effort, to his sister's unconditional concessions and his parents' unwavering protection, to everyone revolving solely around him. He had never imagined he would end up with nothing, nor that the invisible sister he had always looked down on, scorned, and bullied would overturn everything overnight and seize the fortune that had been his for the taking. Richard held his violently thrashing, hysterical son tightly, his face dark and terrifying, his eyes filled with suppressed fury and helplessness. He burned to lose his temper, to argue, to overturn the will, but legal documents, watching relatives, and established facts trapped him in place. For the first time in his domineering life, he tasted utter powerlessness, every ounce of his control completely failing him. "Enough!" Richard gritted out in a low, harsh growl. "Stop making a fool of yourself here. You're only giving outsiders a chance to mock our family. This is already a huge joke." Taylor roared, breaking free from his father's grip, his face contorted with madness. "Everyone here is laughing at us today. It's all her fault. She deliberately waited for today to humiliate us in public." Christy stood quietly in place, watching the hysterical mother and son with cold indifference, her heart calm and icy. After 18 years of suffering and clarity, she had long seen through the true nature of this family. There had never been familial love here, only self-interest. When she was useful, she was family. When she had no value, she was an unwanted outsider. The moment she gained wealth and broke the unfair balance, she instantly became the family's sworn enemy. "I did nothing deliberate," Christy said clearly and steadily. Grandma's will was fully notarized and finalized during her lifetime. The timing, procedure, and contents of the reading were all her final wishes. "Like all of you, I only learned the full truth today. Your humiliation and disgrace are not my doing. You are reaping what you sowed. Your excessive favoritism, your ruthless choices, and your cruel treatment of others have brought this upon yourselves." These blunt, truthful words pierced through every excuse and false justification the three clung to, leaving them utterly speechless and defenseless. The relatives could no longer bear to stay. They rose one after another to take their leave, hurrying away from this awkward, oppressive place of conflict. As each relative left, they glanced subconsciously at Christy with complex, unreadable eyes. Shock, sorrow, envy, and deep, silent guilt. They had witnessed her years of grievance, yet never lifted a finger to help, leaving them with nothing but endless regret. In just 10 minutes, the once lively villa living room turned empty and cold. The elaborate birthday feast sat untouched and growing cold, the venue messy and chaotic, mirroring this thoroughly broken, hypocritical family. Inside the vast house, only the three Carters remained, along with the solitary Christy. Wiping the tears from her face and dropping all pretense of vulnerability, Linda strode quickly toward Christy, her tone forceful and manipulative. "So what if you've inherited Grandma's assets? We are your birth parents, and Taylor is your only biological brother. Blood is thicker than water. No family can cut ties completely and become strangers. You must give a portion of your assets to Taylor. It is your innate responsibility and duty as an elder sister." Richard stepped forward right behind her, abandoning his dignity, yet still exuding domineering control, pressing relentlessly. "We do not ask for all your inheritance, but you must share part of the properties and savings with Taylor. He is the family's only son. He cannot be left with nothing. As a woman, you only need enough to live a stable life. You have no need for such vast assets. The surplus rightfully belongs to your brother." The familiar double standards, moral manipulation, and selfish arguments played out once again, just as they had every single day for 18 years. This was how they had exploited, denied, and drained her entire life. Even now, utterly humiliated and defeated by the truth, they still attempted to manipulate her and seize her legally acquired assets. Christy shook her head gently, her attitude resolute and unyielding, severing all entanglement completely. "I owe no concessions to anyone. Legally, this inheritance is my exclusive personal property and has nothing to do with any of you. Morally and emotionally, 18 years of debt, oppression, and unfairness have long erased all my familial obligations. From the moment you publicly declared me worthless and abandoned me completely, the last trace of affection between us was broken forever." With that, she no longer spared a glance at their hideous, furious expressions. She turned and left without hesitation, never looking back, abandoning this villa filled with endless grievance and harm. Scorching hot wind rushed toward her the moment she stepped outside, instantly sweeping away the stifling, toxic air of the villa. She climbed into her car and closed the door, completely sealing off all the ugliness, quarrels, schemes, and hypocrisy inside the house. Leaning back in the seat, she let out a long, deep breath she had held for 18 years. Her tightly strung nerves finally relaxed. The heavy shackles that had weighed on her for half her life fell away completely at this moment. She drove back to the small apartment she had rented for years. It was simple and unadorned, yet clean, quiet, and peaceful, the only pure sanctuary she had built for herself through her own hard work after adulthood. Here, there was no endless favoritism and oppression, no moral manipulation, no cold contempt and humiliation, no exhausting mental torment. Only pure peace and tranquility that belonged solely to her. She felt no arrogance or wild excitement from her sudden wealth. All she felt was profound relief and ease. Her grandmother, a kind and wise woman who had seen through all worldly cruelty, had left her no flowery last words. Instead, she had used every penny she had saved her entire life to deliver justice 18 years late, gifting Christy the confidence to never be manipulated, bullied, or coerced for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, in the empty, cold villa, the three Carters fell into a night-long frenzy, bitterness, and scheming, none of them able to sleep a wink. After Christy left, Linda completely lost control, collapsing on the sofa and crying bitterly, pouring out endless complaints. She blamed her mother for being cruel and heartless, blamed her daughter for being unfilial and cold-blooded, blamed fate for being unfair, and lamented that her lifelong efforts had been wasted. Never once did she reflect on her decades of favoritism and wrongdoing, stubbornly believing that everyone owed her and her son. Taylor remained trapped in a furious rage, furiously smashing tableware, ornaments, and decorations across the living room. Crystal cups shattered everywhere, sauces and wine spilled across the exquisite tablecloth, leaving the room in utter chaos. He screamed and cursed repeatedly, calling Christy selfish, heartless, and ungrateful, venting his overwhelming jealousy and resentment. Richard sat silently in the corner, smoking cigarette after cigarette, shrouded in swirling smoke. After his fleeting anger came bone-deep greed and panic. He knew clearly that the entire fortune he and his wife had spent a lifetime building was far inferior to this massive inheritance left by his mother-in-law. The son they had spoiled and supported wholeheartedly had suddenly lost all his wealth and privilege, doomed to no longer live a lazy, effortless life. As the long night wore on and their furious outbursts faded, the three of them shared one identical, humble and calculating thought: to bow down, apologize, reconcile, and make amends. As long as they could soften Christie's heart and make her concede a portion of her inheritance, as long as they could secure Taylor's wealth and stability, they were willing to abandon all dignity, pride, and grace, lowering themselves to fake remorse and submission. The three of them stayed up all night, repeatedly drafting their apologies, practicing humble gestures, and plotting how to gain sympathy, manipulate her emotions, and move Christie's heart. They were convinced that Christie was inherently soft-hearted and loyal to family, and that if they took the initiative to admit their mistakes, she would soften and compromise just as she had countless times before. They would never know that 18 years of endless harm, oppression, and betrayal had completely erased all softness and expectation from Christie's heart. Now, she had no more weaknesses, only absolute clarity, calm, and unyielding resolve. By noon the next day, the midsummer sun remained blinding and scorching, spilling over the quiet apartment complex. Lush greenery filled the peaceful neighborhood, where the residents lived in harmony. Its clean, tranquil atmosphere stood in stark, uncompromising contrast to the noise, hypocrisy, and ugliness of the villa the day before. There were no biased accusations, no calculated schemes, no cold, watching eyes, only steady, undisturbed peace. Christie woke early, tidied her apartment, prepared a simple lunch, and savored the quiet peace that was finally hers. A full night of undisturbed sleep had freed her from the mental exhaustion that had haunted her for years. All past grievances, resentment, and entanglement had faded away. Her heart was light and calm, no longer burdened by hatred or obsession, filled only with anticipation for her new life. At 12:30, the apartment doorbell rang precisely. Its tone was urgent yet tentative, cautious and restrained, a far cry from the domineering impatience she had known for so long. Christie walked to the visual doorbell and looked out. The three people standing in the hallway looked utterly haggard and worn, drained by a sleepless night of scheming and anxious deliberation. Linda's once immaculate hair was messy and unkempt, her eyes puffy, bloodshot, and sunken, her complexion deathly pale. The poised, domineering grace of a wealthy matriarch was completely gone, replaced by a deliberately frail, pitiful demeanor. Richard's eyes were likewise lined with red fatigue, his face aged and weary. He had forced down the authority and arrogance he had carried his whole life, wearing a stiff, artificial mask of remorse. Taylor stood with his head drooping, clearly resentful and impatient, dragged here against his will. No trace of regret lingered in his eyes, only unyielding jealousy, greed, and discontent. The three stood rigid and awkward in the hallway, stripped of their usual arrogance, their habitual dominance completely vanished. All they could offer was forced humility and performative misery, their pretense utterly hollow and ridiculous. Christie watched them calmly for several seconds, emotionless, before pressing the door release. "Come in!" They stepped inside cautiously, moving with unnatural quiet, standing stiffly in the center of the living room with wandering, evasive eyes, unable to meet Christie's steady gaze. The accusations, criticism, suppression, and lectures that had always come so easily to them now died on their tongues, leaving them frozen and thoroughly embarrassed. After a brief, heavy silence, Linda broke first. Her eyes flooded with tears that streamed down her cheeks as she launched into a dramatic, pitiful display of remorse, her posture subservient to the extreme. "My child, Mom was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. Yesterday I was foolish, impulsive, and cruel. I should never have humiliated you in public, never have favored your brother so blindly, never have let you suffer for so many years. For 18 years, I have wronged you deeply. Can you forgive me just this once?" She wept dramatically, putting on a heart-wrenching show, willfully reducing decades of entrenched favoritism, daily oppression, and prolonged mental abuse to a momentary lapse of judgment. She deliberately ignored years of manipulation, resource exploitation, and unfair treatment, hoping that a few cheap tears and a shallow apology would earn her daughter's forgiveness and her share of the massive inheritance. Her every word was calculated and hypocritical. Richard stepped forward immediately after her, lowering his perpetually proud stance, his tone heavy and hoarse with feigned remorse. "Dad is sorry, too. I spoke too harshly and hurt your heart deeply yesterday. You are blood of our blood. No rift between family can never be mended. For all these years, we overlooked your efforts, your grievances, your quiet perseverance. From now on, we will make it right. We will cherish you properly." The couple played their parts perfectly, in seamless unison, portraying themselves as remorseful, awakened parents. Once, Christie's soft, loyal heart would have wavered. She would have felt pity, relented, and chosen forgiveness. But after 18 years of suffering and endless exposure to their hypocrisy and schemes, she watched their clumsy performance with complete indifference. Exchanging a quick glance, they nudged Taylor forward, urging him to apologize. Taylor hung his head, utterly unwilling, and mumbled a perfunctory, insincere line. "Sis, I was wrong yesterday. I shouldn't have fought with you." His apology was sloppy and hollow, lacking the slightest trace of guilt or remorse. The only emotion in his eyes was anxious fear, fear of losing his inheritance, fear of losing his unearned wealth. The three stood quietly, holding their breath, fully expecting Christie to soften, to shed tears, to yield as she always had, to prioritize family bonds and split her fortune for Taylor's sake. The room fell deathly silent, save for Linda's feigned, quiet sobs, the air thick with oppressive hypocrisy. Seated upright on the sofa, Christie remained poised, calm, and completely unmoved. She watched their charade unfold without flicker of emotion. Only after their performance ended did she speak, her voice cool, steady, and unflinchingly direct. "Stop pretending. You are not truly remorseful. You are only sorry that you can no longer control me, sorry that you cannot get your hands on Grandma's inheritance." This single sentence shredded every layer of their fake repentance and exposed their hollow masks. Their faces turned rigid and mortified. Linda's tears froze mid-cheek, leaving her trapped in humiliating awkwardness. "That's not true." Linda rushed to argue, doubling down on her pitiful act to salvage the situation. "I have truly repented. From now on, everything in this family will be split equally with you. We will never favor Taylor again. We will cherish you and make up for all the past hurt. Please forgive us. It is far too late." Christie shook her head gently, her tone firm and final. "All the damage is done. The rifts run too deep to ever be repaired. No compensation is needed, and no forgiveness is required. Broken family bonds can never be mended." Faced with her refusal, Richard abandoned gentle persuasion and resorted to moral coercion, his tone laced with implicit pressure. "Christie, we gave you life and raised you. Parental grace outweighs everything. Even if we have made mistakes, you cannot be so cold and unforgiving. Now that you have wealth and stability, you ought to be grateful and uphold your family ties. I have long repaid the debt of your upbringing." Christie's gaze was clear and unyielding, every word logical and resolute. "Growing up, I was sensible, disciplined, and diligent. I never caused trouble, never demanded anything, never burdened you. As an adult, I studied independently, built my own life from nothing, and never relied on this family. Through 18 years of obedience, compromise, endurance, and self-sacrifice, I have fully repaid every obligation I owed you. In return, you gave me 18 years of constant dismissal, suppression, favoritism, humiliation, and mental torment. You were the ones who severed every familial bond. Now you seek to use family duty to manipulate me and seize my legally acquired assets. It is unfair and cruel beyond measure." Her flawless reasoning left Richard speechless, his face flushing pale and red with embarrassment, thoroughly defeated. Losing all patience, Linda dropped her weak pretense entirely, her tone turning sharp and coercive, wielding family obligation as a weapon. "Even if we have wronged you, Taylor is your only biological brother, your closest family in this world. You possess a vast fortune and live securely while he has nothing and faces an uncertain future. How can you bear to watch him struggle? Sharing your assets with him is your inherent duty as an elder sister. His destitution is the result of your decades of indulgence and unconditional enabling, not my responsibility. Christy lifted her eyes, her gaze cold, sharp, and piercing straight to the truth. He is a fully grown, healthy, competent adult. He should be responsible for his own life and build his own future. You spoiled him, tolerated his laziness and selfishness, and raised him to be an entitled, dependent leech. Now that your parenting has failed, you will never force me to pay for your mistakes. Christie's frank, perceptive retort shattered the last flicker of hope lingering in the hearts of the three family members. They had long been certain that if they lowered their stance, put on a pitiful show, and appealed to family bonds, Christie would soften, yield out of affection, and sacrifice her own interests just as she had for over a decade. Yet they never imagined that after enduring unending harm and betrayal, Christie had fully woken up and transformed. She would no longer be bound by family ties, manipulated by moral obligations, or swayed by sentimental pleas. All her timidity and subservience had faded away, leaving only clarity, rationality, and unshakable resolve. Taylor could no longer hold back his boiling rage and arrogance. He stormed forward one step, his face twisted with malice, and snarled through gritted teeth. "How can you say this is our fault? I'm the only son of this family. All the property should have belonged to me. You popped up out of nowhere and stole everything that's mine. You're selfish, cold-hearted, ungrateful, and turn your back on your own blood. I have never taken anything that belongs to you." Christie glanced calmly at her furious brother, her tone quiet yet powerful. Grandma's assets were her private property, and she held absolute power to dispose of them as she wished. It was her full right to give her wealth to whoever she chose. You squandered her kindness, betrayed her trust, and grew into an irresponsible adult who only knew how to take and spend recklessly. Being stripped of your inheritance is a consequence you brought entirely upon yourself. As for all the assets owned by Mom and Dad, I have never coveted, fought over, or taken a single cent of them. They all remain yours to keep. You already possess the life savings my parents accumulated their whole lives, yet your greed still cannot be satisfied. The truly selfish one has always been you. That worthless pile of property means nothing. Taylor shouted with red, bitter eyes, consumed by resentment. It's nothing compared to Grandma's massive inheritance. You're rolling in money and live a worry-free life. You could easily help me with a snap of your fingers, but you refuse to lift a finger. You just hate seeing me do well and target me on purpose. I bear no obligation to cover for your laziness, to clean up the messes caused by your selfishness, much less to atone for my parents' favoritism and failed parenting. Christie's voice turned icy, no warmth left in her eyes. You are a fully grown, independent adult. Whether your life turns out well or poorly, whether you live in wealth or poverty, is entirely your own responsibility and has nothing to do with me. Richard looked at his violent, self-centered, incompetent son, then back at his calm, clear-headed daughter, and for the first time, a profound sense of absurdity and irony washed over him. He had poured all his love and favor into spoiling his son for a lifetime, while constantly suppressing and draining his daughter. He had stubbornly believed that his son would carry on the family business and support them in old age, while his daughter was nothing more than an outsider who would leave and become useless sooner or later. But the reality was the complete opposite. The son he had doted on endlessly was good for nothing, self-indulgent, irresponsible, and only capable of taking. The daughter he had cast aside and mistreated year after year was independent, resilient, upright, kind, and fully self-reliant. This belated realization brought him no trace of guilt or remorse, only deeper resentment and obsession. He still clung firmly to the belief that his daughter's fortune and good fortune ought to be used to support and benefit his son. "Christie, you cannot be so ruthless and leave no room for compromise," Richard said in a heavy, stern tone, attempting to pressure her with public reputation and clan gossip. "If word of this spreads, all relatives and outsiders will label you as ungrateful, cold-blooded, and disloyal to your family after striking it rich. There is no need for you to ruin your lifelong reputation over money. Setting aside a portion of your assets for Taylor would be the best outcome for you, for us, and for the entire family." This was blatant public opinion manipulation and moral coercion. They hoped to force Christie to compromise and sacrifice herself through worldly prejudice outside gossip, and the stigma of being an unfilial child. Christy stood unafraid and unflinching, her gaze open and fearless. I have a clear conscience and owe no one anything. For 18 years, everyone watched me endure unfair treatment, public humiliation, and endless exploitation, yet not a single person spoke up for me or stood by my side. Now I am merely safeguarding my legally acquired property and defending my own justice. Why should I care about the judgments of strangers and idle gossip? The ones who have ruined their reputations and become a laughingstock are you, for your rampant favoritism, failed parenting, and public mistreatment of your own daughter, not me, who only protects myself. All soft tactics, moral blackmail, and public pressure had failed completely. Linda dropped her gentle, remorseful facade entirely, her eyes filled with venomous malice and threats, and she spoke sharply. So you're determined to be cruel and cut all ties with us today? Fine. If you show us no mercy, we will fight this to the bitter end. We will visit every relative and acquaintance one by one, spreading slander about you, claiming you're unfilial, cold-hearted, ungrateful, and scheme to seize the old lady's inheritance while abandoning your family. We will let everyone see your true colors. Go ahead and spread your lies. Make all the trouble you want. Christy remained calm and unafraid, her demeanor steady and composed. Every detail of what happened yesterday was witnessed by all the relatives present. Everyone saw how you showed favoritism, humiliated me in public, and drained me dry, while I endured all the grievance and abandonment silently. Everyone knows the full truth deep down. If you twist the facts and slander me maliciously, you will only expose your own selfishness and cruelty further and make fools of yourselves. No one will believe your falsehoods. Linda trembled all over, left speechless, and enraged yet powerless to retaliate. For more than a decade, she had controlled and manipulated her daughter, endlessly exploiting her through her family attachments and sense of moral guilt, a trick that had never failed her. But today, this familiar tactic was completely useless against Christy, who had woken up fully and severed all her soft vulnerabilities. The collapse of her years-long control sent her spiraling into panic and madness. Taylor completely lost his temper and all rationality, his face twisted with rage as he issued a vicious threat. I don't care what you say or what logic you use. I must get money and property from you. If you refuse to give in today, I will come to your apartment to harass you every single day. I will make sure you never have a single peaceful day. Faced with her brother's violent threats of harassment, Christy stayed calm and composed, responding plainly, "You are welcome to try. My apartment is fully covered by surveillance cameras, with complete footage from the entrance gate and the hallway preserved at all times. If you come to harass me maliciously, pick fights, or stalk me persistently, I will call the police immediately, secure all evidence, and hold you legally accountable. In the end, you will be the one embarrassed, saddled with a criminal record, and your entire future ruined. Feel free to test me." These few calm, piercing words instantly intimidated the overbearing Taylor. At home, he only dared to throw tantrums and act violently behind closed doors, and he had never dared to cross the law or bear legal consequences. At the thought of police intervention, a criminal record, and legal liability, his arrogance faded instantly, and he no longer dared to shout threats recklessly. Richard looked at his out-of-control, ill-mannered son, then back at his self-possessed, unyielding daughter, and finally faced the hard truth. No amount of pitiful acting, apologies, pressure, or threats would make Christy back down today. She had truly let go of her attachment to family bonds, cut all ties, and could never again be controlled or manipulated by them. A long, dead silence settled over the tiny living room of the apartment. Before Christy's clarity, composure, and unwavering poise, the family's fake remorse, self-serving schemes, and impotent rage stood fully exposed, ugly and ridiculous for all to see. Christy rose slowly, tall and steady with a calm, unshakable aura, her face blank of any emotion. She was ready to deliver her final verdict, putting an end to 18 years of entanglement and torment once and for all. Her gaze cold and clear, she spoke slowly, every word sharp and final, leaving no room for compromise. "I will lay everything out plainly for the last time. From this moment on, we are even, and we will have nothing more to do with one another. First, all properties, Storefronts, savings, investments, and every asset under your names remain entirely Taylor's. I will never compete for, covet, or lay claim to any of it ever again. I will completely withdraw from all your property divisions and stay out of every family dispute you have. All the favor, support, and devotion you've poured out your whole lives belong solely to Taylor, and I will never interfere with your family's legacy. Second, every piece of inheritance, real estate, savings, and assets Grandma left me is my sole legal personal property, having nothing whatsoever to do with the three of you. You have no right to demand, divide, pester, or question it. No amount of sympathy, guilt, or blood ties will make me yield or compromise an inch. Third, I let go of all the suppression, dismissal, biased treatment, humiliation, and mental exhaustion you inflicted on me over these 18 years. This does not mean I forgive the harm you've done me. I am merely choosing to release myself from dwelling on the past and endless self-torment. I will no longer fixate on right and wrong, long for your affection, crave your approval, or drain myself for your sake. I have truly let it all go. Fourth, moving forward, we will be nothing more than distant relatives, keeping our distance and minding our own lives. There will be no holiday visits, small talk, or casual gatherings, and our daily lives will never be tangled up in money or forced familial bonds. Rely on the son you spoiled and supported your whole lives for your old age care. Turn to the parents who always covered your mistakes and indulged you whenever Taylor hits hardship or trouble. The rest of your lives are none of my business, and my future will hold no place for you. These four clear, resolute statements drew a firm line between them, severing 18 years of familial ties, financial entanglement, and past grievances, drawing a clean end to a lifetime of her grievance and endurance. As Linda listened, she broke down into bitter, uncontrollable sobs. There was no remorse or regret in her tears, only overwhelming despair and resentment. For 18 years, she had favored her son, staked everything on him, only to lose all her dignity, family bond, and carefully laid plans. Now she begged to reconcile and claim wealth, yet the daughter she had hurt deeply shut her out completely. "How can you be so heartless?" Linda choked out, completely losing her self-control. "We are your birth parents. The grace of raising you is greater than mountains. How can you abandon us entirely and cut all family ties? After all we've done to raise you, how can you treat us with such cold cruelty?" "I am not cruel," Christy replied with an open, unclouded gaze, each word firm and powerful. "You were the ones who were cruel, cold, and disloyal first. You publicly declared I deserved nothing. You oppressed, drained, belittled, and humiliated me every single day for 18 years. You treated me like an outsider, a tool, a burden, and you were the ones who severed all affection between us. I am only returning the same unyielding coldness you showed me. I have never harmed you on purpose, plotted against you, slandered you, or humiliated you in front of others. I only stand up for myself, see the truth clearly, and refuse to be manipulated or forced to pay for your selfishness any longer. This is not cruelty, it is my own salvation." Richard's lips trembled slightly, his face gray and haggard. For a lifetime, he had held absolute power and gotten his way in everything, yet now he tasted utter powerlessness and loss for the first time. He knew full well Christy meant every word she said. They would never again be able to manipulate her, nor would they have any right to meddle in her life or demand anything from her. Refusing to accept defeat, he clung to his last shred of obsession and gritted out a question. "Aren't you afraid of loneliness and regret in the future? Cutting off all family. You'll be all alone. When you grow old and weary, there will be no one to rely on, no one to entrust your life to?" "I will never regret it." Christy shook her head gently, her eyes bright and serene. "True reliance is never given by others. It is earned with your own two hands. Once I foolishly hoped for your love and protection, only to receive endless pain and mental exhaustion. Now I have security, assets, ability, and a life fully my own. I am my own most reliable, steady support. With or without you, I can live a peaceful, smooth life." These words of clear wisdom shattered the last line of psychological defense the three held. All their lives, they had believed everyone needed family and blood ties to lean on, so they could freely exploit their daughter's soft spot. They never imagined decades of mistreatment had erased every shred of her longing for family affection, freeing her entirely from the chains of her toxic family. Taylor's face twisted with frustration and bitter resentment, still refusing to give up and making one last, desperate plea. "We share the same blood as brother and sister. Can you truly refuse to help me even a little and leave no trace of our bond? Family love is a two-way commitment to care and support, not one-sided taking and draining," Christy replied coldly. "For 18 years, you have never once yielded to me, sympathized with me, lifted a hand to help me, or treated me with kindness. You only seized my resources, laughed at my pain, took advantage of my concessions, and trampled on my sincerity. This one-sided fake bond has long ceased to exist. I have no obligation to pay for your laziness and greed." Every truth had been laid bare, every excuse shut down, every false mask torn to pieces. The three stood there, utterly humiliated, speechless, helpless, and plunged into total despair. Christy lifted her hand in a clear gesture to show them out, her tone calm yet unshakable. "Everything has been said, and this is truly the end. You may leave now. Do not come back to pester me. Do not use family duty to manipulate me, and do not disturb my life again. May we each live our own lives and never cross paths again." The air hung dead and still, as if frozen solid into blocks of ice. Linda, Richard, and Taylor stood rigid in the center of the living room. All their hypocritical masks, domineering confidence, pitiful acts, and calculating schemes shattered utterly and collapsed in humiliating defeat before Christy's resolute words of never disturb each other again. They still clung to a faint hope that she would soften, just as she had for 18 long years, yielding and sacrificing herself out of blood ties, fear of gossip, and the so-called debt of gratitude for being raised. Yet Christy merely stood there quietly, her features cold and calm, not a flicker of emotion in her eyes. No pity, no hesitation, not a trace of reluctance. At this moment, they were forced to admit the truth. The daughter they had manipulated, exploited, and bullied for half her life had truly changed beyond recognition. She had cut away her soft spot for family bonds, broken free from the chains of her toxic birth family. She would no longer pay the price for their selfishness, nor drain herself over meaningless blood relations. Linda's lips trembled. She had cried all her tears away that morning, her makeup smudged and ruined. The poise and arrogance of a wealthy matriarch were gone without a trace. She stared fixedly at Christy, seething with overwhelming resentment, yet dared not hurl insults or make threats again. She fully understood that all her moral blackmail, public pressure, and hysterical tantrums were completely powerless against Christy, who was fully awake and backed by solid security. The tactics she had relied on her whole life, favoritism to control her children, family ties to bind them into endless sacrifice, had backfired and failed on her own family. Richard's back stiffened, his weathered face drained of all color, his chest tight with suppressed grief and regret. He had been overbearing and authoritative all his life, never losing face before clan relatives. He had laid down every household rule, handed out all favoritism, and pushed his own daughter into despair. He had believed blood was an unbreakable chain, that the debt of raising a child was an eternal bargaining chip, that no matter how much suffering she endured, his daughter would eventually cave and come back. Only now did he wake to the bitter truth. Every bit of compliance he had taken for granted was merely the product of Christy's repeated soft-hearted concessions. Every cruel, unfair treatment had piled up over the years into irreparable rifts. It was his and Linda's own cold cruelty that had driven away their most sensible, patient, and innocent child. Beside him, Taylor had lost all his earlier rage and arrogance, left only with bitter jealousy and panic. His shoulders slouched, his hands clenched tight, his eyes filled with anxiety and unease. Spoiled rotten by his parents since childhood, he had grown used to gaining everything without effort, living a trouble-free life. He had never known the terror of having nothing. The family property that should have been his alone had long failed to satisfy his ballooning greed, and Grandma's nearly $4 million inheritance had become an obsession he thought he was guaranteed to get. Now that easy fortune had turned into an unattainable mirage. He knew full well that with his lazy, useless nature, he would quickly burn through whatever he owned. His parents were growing older and could no longer cover all his mistakes unconditionally. There would be no endless favor and indulgence waiting for him in the future, no sister he could endlessly exploit. The thought of a life of poverty and hardship drowned all his pride in sheer panic. Overwhelmed by shame and desolation, the three finally turned and left in a state of complete disarray. No arguments, no clinging, no roaring outbursts of resentment, only heavy, dragging footsteps tramping out of the bright, clean apartment. Wind swept through the stairwell, blowing away their last glimmer of hope and severing the 18 years of toxic fate that had tangled Christy. The apartment door clicked shut softly, locking all schemes, quarrels, grievances, and entanglements out for good. At long last, the house sank into a complete, long-awaited peace. Christy walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling window and gently drew back the curtains. Bright summer sunlight flooded in, spilling soft warmth across the whole room, falling on her shoulders and eyes, chasing away the haze and cold that had lingered over her for half her life. Outside, green plants flourished, the wind was gentle and the sun mild, ordinary life unfolding in quiet, tender tranquility. She brushed her fingertips lightly over the window ledge, touching the warm sunlight, her heart clear and unclouded. For 18 years, she had lived trapped by her family's bias, bound by worldly norms, chained to the unspoken rules that elder sisters must be sensible and children must be endlessly grateful. She had hidden her edges, suppressed her desires, yielded at every turn, and given everything she had, scrambling to please them, enduring humiliation and wrongs in silence, only craving a tiny scrap of familial affection, a moment of fair treatment. All she received in return was endless suppression, sacrifices taken for granted, blatant favoritism, the public humiliation of being declared worthless, and the utter despair of being abandoned by her own family. Fortunately, there was still justice in the world, and a little reserved kindness meant just for her. Grandma had poured every penny she had saved over a lifetime to lift Christy up, granting her a dignified reversal of fate, solid lifelong security, and the chance to live a brand new life. This inheritance was never merely a sudden windfall in the eyes of the world. It was an elderly woman who had seen the coldness of human nature and the heartlessness of her own daughter, leaving her granddaughter the deepest, tenderest love and long overdue justice. It redeemed 18 years of hidden pain, put an end to all her self-abasement, and shattered the fate that had bound her for so long. Christy tilted her head slightly, closed her eyes, and let out a long breath she had held trapped inside her for 18 years. The taut nerves that had strained for decades finally relaxed. All obsessions, resentment, bitterness, and futile longing drifted away on the wind. She no longer hated, no longer waited, no longer hoped. Hatred was an obsession, waiting was self-torment, longing was self-inflicted suffering. From this day forward, she let go of all past wounds, not because she forgave their cruelty and selfishness, but to set free the version of herself that had been trapped and suffering in the past. The blood tie remained, yet all affection was gone for good. She would never forget the life they had given her and the years they had raised her, but she would no longer submit to blind filial obedience and compromise. She acknowledged the blood bond between them, yet she would never drain herself for their sake again. All debts and wrongs of the past 18 years were fully settled. Their remaining lives had nothing to do with hers, and hers would hold no place for them. Down in the complex, soft wind brushed the tree branches, shifting light and shadow across the grounds, a scene of quiet, peaceful days. Christy slowly opened her eyes, clear and bright, gentle yet unshakably resolute. Once, she had lived for her family, for rigid social rules, for other people's expectations, walking on eggshells, covered in invisible wounds. From now on, the world stretched wide and gentle, and she would live only for herself. No more bending to others' selfishness, no more currying favor for scraps of affection, no more enduring humiliation, no more carrying the weight of other people's lives. She had assets to secure her home, inner strength to stand firm, a clear mind, and a life fully her own. The storms of the past were fully over, and a brand new life was just beginning to unfold.